If you want to track your sports or your health, what does science say are the best devices to get? Well, in my testing in different categories, there are clear winners, and you don't always need to get the most expensive or newest device to get great heart rate tracking, GPS tracking, or sleep tracking. However, for some specific features, you might need to spend a little bit more money, but hopefully during the Prime days at least, you'll get some good deals regardless. Now, in this video, I want to provide a quick overview of the devices I'd recommend, the devices I'd steer away from, and the ones I'd be eyeing myself. I'll also discuss which devices have the best app experience and data interpretation, so it's not just about hardware but also firmware. And if you do end up pulling the trigger or buy anything at all on Amazon during the Prime days, the only thing I would ask is you first click my Amazon affiliate link first, so it's a general link. It doesn't cost you any extra, but it's a great help to the channel. So let's get to it, and let's start with my top recommendations for heart rate tracking. Now, regular viewers will know this type of overview, but basically the better the correlation of a device with the reference device, the more to the top right they are. And here, just because it's the most recent sort of premium device, I marked the Apple Watch Ultra 3 in red. So it's one of the top performers because it's very far to the top right. But as we'll zoom into some of the best performing devices, you'll see that you don't need to spend that much money to get good performance. Now, this is for indoor cycling, so a relatively easy exercise for devices to track. And we're going to take a look at 3 different types of exercises: indoor cycling, outdoor cycling, and running, just to get a feel for which device to get for whatever you are interested in. But let's zoom into just the better performing devices, and that's displayed right here. So these are all devices with a correlation of 0.95 or higher, so they're all doing quite well. And even down here, there's still quite a few good devices. Like, for instance, the Whoop strap if you wear it on your biceps. So there's the Whoop strap MG and the Whoop strap 5. There's the Polar Verity Sense, which is quite a cheap heart rate tracking device that you can wear on your biceps as well. Then, for instance, different Huawei devices like the Huawei Watch Fit 4 and Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro. But even a Fit 2 will do rather well. So for indoor cycling, you have quite a few options, even something like the new Suunto Vertical 2. All of them are doing quite well, but I want to highlight a few of them now for indoor cycling before moving on to outdoor cycling, which is a lot harder for devices, and you'll see a much clearer split. So some of the devices I would recommend to look outdoor for indoor cycling, so for relatively easy exercise for devices to track during this Prime Day sale, would be the Pixel Watch 3. So the newer one is coming out, but you're already getting really good performance with the Pixel Watch 3. The Amazfit Helio strap, either worn on the wrist or even better on the biceps. An older Apple Watch, like an Apple Watch Generation 10, which is up here, so one of the best performing devices, or even an older Apple Watch SE. You could even get a Suunto device like the Suunto Vertical 2, though I doubt this will be on sale. And then a bit lower down here we have, for instance, the Polar Verity Sense, but also something like the Powerbeats Pro 2, which you wear in your ears, which have good overall heart rate tracking performance. Or if you're lucky and they're on sale already, the Apple AirPods Pro 3, one of the best heart rate trackers out there, again an in-ear device. And if you have an iPhone, that's really recommended. But of course, you need to have your phone with you then. So that's indoor cycling, but what about outdoor cycling? As I mentioned before, this is a lot harder for devices. So here we have the same overview, but now for outdoor cycling with, again, just because it's a recent device, the Apple Watch Ultra 3 marked in red. And we see quite a spread in performance. But again, let's zoom into just the better performing devices. So these are all devices with a correlation of 0.95 or higher, but let's include a few more. So these are all devices with a correlation of 0.9 or higher now. And as you can see, we have, for instance, the Fitbit Charge 6, which is relatively cheap. And as you'll see for sleep stage tracking, it's also doing rather well. Different Huawei Watch Fit models again, so the Watch Fit 4, 2, Watch Fit 3, all of these are doing well. Older Apple Watches like the Apple Watch Series 10 are still really recommended. The Amazfit Helio strap is doing well, the Pixel Watch 3. So again, these are some of the same devices doing well also for harder exercises. And again, in-ear devices like the Powerbeats Pro 2 and the Apple AirPods Pro 3 are also doing really well. Especially the AirPods Pro 3 are really good heart rate trackers. But many of you might also be runners, and running is actually quite hard for devices to track because there's so much bumpiness. So let's take a look at a quick overview for that. Now, I didn't test all devices for running, but as you can see right here, again, the Apple Watch Ultra 3 is doing rather well, but there's many more devices in this overview. So again, let's zoom in a bit. These are just the devices with a correlation of 0.9 or higher again. So again, look out for an older generation Apple Watch, even something like an Apple Watch Series 9 or 10. Also, the Pixel Watch is doing really well. The Amazfit Helio strap still a top performer. And here we also see the Garmin Forerunner series jump in. So the more expensive one is the 970, but I actually really like the 570. Now, if you get a somewhat cheaper or mid-range Garmin Forerunner, Garmin will lock out some of the features, like some of the mapping features, so be aware of that. But overall, it's doing really well. Also, the Race 2 in a very initial test did quite well. Pixel watches are also some of the top performers. AirPods, so it's really some of the same ones coming out on top. But I can actually summarize all of this per device as well. That will give you an even better impression for the specific device you're interested in. I'll highlight about 8 or 10 devices or so really quickly. We'll go through them in just 1, 2, maybe 3 minutes, so you can see some of my top performers for heart rate tracking and how they compare for all different exercises. So let's dive right in. Now let's go through the devices alphabetically so you can sort of know where your favorite device might end up. And regular viewers will be familiar with this type of overview. So that correlation we were looking at before is along the vertical axis, so the better device, more to the top it is. And we have the different exercises along the horizontal axis. So typically I'll test them for indoor cycling, biking outside, running, and weightlifting, where each device is marked with a dot and the particular device we're looking at is marked in red, where the correlation is mentioned first, and after that is the percentage of devices it's better than. And so in this case, the Amazfit Helio strap worn on the biceps is better than 83% of devices for indoor cycling. So it's really among some of the top devices. It's doing better than 98% of devices for biking outside. It's basically one of the best devices out there for running. And also for weightlifting, it's doing rather well, though there most devices actually don't do that well. So the Amazfit Helio strap-on on the biceps is really one of the top performers. And it's doing a little bit less well if you wear it on the wrist, which is what we basically expect. So overall, really a device to recommend, especially with this new type of strap that's potentially coming with the sort of special edition. So I'm really happy with this. I'm testing this right now. However, all this testing was done with the regular straps. Then another top performer is the Apple AirPods Pro 3. So it's basically one of the best devices, or maybe the best device for cycling indoors and outdoors. Also for running, it most of the time did quite well, though I had some issues with my initial run. And then for weightlifting, it's again one of the best devices out there. Though for running, that fit is really important, as you'll see in my updated review. Then the Apple Watch Series 10, so the previous generation, which you can hopefully get for a good deal during the Prime Day sales. It's really one of the top performers overall. So for spinning, biking outside, running indoors, running outdoors, and weightlifting, it's doing really well. Though as you will see in all my Apple Watch reviews, for weightlifting, Apple Watches sometimes have some dropouts where they don't continuously detect your heart rate. Next, let's go to Coros. I have two favorite devices which don't do well for everything. So I really like the Coros Pace 3, which for me for running did quite well. For the other exercises, it didn't always do well. And the newer Coros Pace Pro. The problem is that it didn't do amazing for heart rate tracking. I just really love this device for the way it looks and the way it handles. But there, like for many Garmin devices, I would connect an external heart rate monitor. That's even true for the Pace 3 as well, since I believe this has the same sensor. So it really depends on the circumstances how well it's performing. Then if you want to go a bit cheaper, the Fitbit Charge 6 isn't absolutely terrible. It's also not great. But for the price, there's okay heart rate tracking, but especially good sleep stage tracking, especially with that new updated sleep stage tracking algorithm that Google just introduced. I tested that for the Pixel Watch 3 and it's the same algorithm on the Fitbit Charge 6 and it's just amazing. Now let's head to Garmin. What can you get a good deal on? Probably the Forerunner 570, which is doing quite well for running, not as good for the different cycling exercises or weightlifting. Again, Garmin devices have a great ecosystem. You can connect many sensors, so that's where Garmin really excels. But I would generally recommend connecting an external heart rate monitor. So just use a chest strap. That's my general recommendation. And the same for the Venue 3. There's now the Venue 4, so you can probably get a good deal on the Venue 3, which I think is a good all-round device, or it's sort of a very well-rounded device in the Garmin ecosystem, but just use a chest strap. Then we have the Huawei Watch Fit 4, which is a great heart rate monitor for a decent price. You can also get a Watch Fit 3, you'll still get a great deal, and they more or less look the same. Or you can get the Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro, which doesn't necessarily have a lot better heart rate tracking than the Huawei Watch Fit 4. It just looks a bit more premium. So it's like the Apple Watch Ultra is the Huawei Watch Fit 4 Pro and the Apple Watch is the Huawei Watch Fit 4. Then we have the Pixel Watch 3, one of the best devices for heart rate tracking on Android. It's really amazing. Overall, the Pixel Watch 4 is also very promising, but you have to wait a day or two for that review. Unless you see this video late, then the Pixel Watch 4 review is already out. But you can probably get a better deal on the Pixel Watch 3 and it just performs really well. I'm quite happy with the Pixel Watch 3. Then we have the Polar Verity Sense. Now that's a heart rate monitor you wear on your biceps and that generally performed very well in my testing as well. So generally measuring heart rate on the biceps is easier than on the wrist. And the Polar Verity Sense is quite affordable. It just tracks heart rate. That's basically all you can do with it unless you use some external apps. But overall, for a decent heart rate tracking, not bad. Then for in-ear tracking, we previously looked at the Apple AirPods Pro 3. But if you want even more secure fit, then you can get the Powerbeats Pro 2. These also work rather well. I was really happy with them. I don't like their look as much, but that's really personal. Still, you get great heart rate tracking and it's in the ear, so you don't have a problem with tension on the wrist like you have with many wrist-worn devices. Finally, let's talk about Suunto. They recently released a new heart rate sensor, and that's both in the Race 2 and the Suunto Vertical 2. Now, I did most testing with the Suunto Vertical 2, which did really well for cycling indoors. For biking and running, I had some issues, but it did better on my colleague Raphael. So some people will have better performance with some sensors than with others. And on me, most heart rate monitors actually struggle more than on the average person. At least that's my observation so far. So for me, you will see a bigger distinction between the really great performers and the mediocre performers. Overall, I'm really happy with how the Suunto Vertical 2 looks, basically the whole interface. It's more subjective that I really like the Race 2 and the Vertical 2. If you want to get a better deal, people really like the MIP sensor of the Vertical 1, so that's also an option. So that's heart rate tracking. I quickly went through a lot of my top performers, but in the end, it's up to what you want and what your focus is, and that also includes some other fitness metrics. Next, what if you want to track your sleep stages, so your deep sleep, light sleep, and REM sleep? What devices are best for this? Let's take a look. And here we have an overview of the sleep stage tracking performance of many devices that I tested in the past. So we use different EEG reference devices that actually measure brain waves to measure my sleep stages more reliably. And then we check how different smartwatches actually compare to this. Now, my reference devices aren't perfect, but they're good enough to distinguish between great, good, medium, and poor sleep stage tracking. And again, the more to the top right a device is, the better is its agreement with the reference. And overall, there are now actually 5 brands best for sleep stage tracking. There's 8 Sleep with their 8 Sleep pod, which is super expensive, but it can actually also improve your sleep because it heats and cools each side of the bed independently. So it's not a wearable, but actually goes around your mattress. It's my favorite sleep improvement device, but you probably cannot get it during the Prime Day sales. Still, if you're interested and you want to get the best discount possible, use my affiliate link up here or down here. But let's talk about the brands you can actually buy on Amazon. There's the Pixel Watch and different Fitbit devices. All Fitbit devices going down to even the Fitbit HR, I think, which was probably released in maybe 2016 or so. I don't know the exact period, but it must be close to 10 years old. Still has amazing sleep stage tracking because Fitbit recently improved their sleep stage tracking. And I tested it for the Pixel Watch 3 and did really well. And you should get similar performance with any Fitbit device. Apple has really amazing sleep stage tracking, so that's the second brand, and that's in all my testing of the Apple Watch Ultra, but also the older Apple Watch SE. All of these are doing really well. The Oura Ring is also a great sleep stage tracker. And finally, we have the Nukuwa or Sleep 2 app. Now, this is an app that connects to different heart rate monitors. It was developed here in Austria. That's also something to check out. But again, it has a subscription model. Whereas Apple and Fitbit don't require a subscription. And Oura and 8 Sleep also require a subscription. So it really depends on how much money you're willing to spend and if you're okay with paying a monthly subscription fee. The second tier of devices not only include one device, and that's the Whoop strap. I still need to do my updated review of it, but overall it has pretty good sleep stage tracking, but not absolute top tier in my testing. But these are the only 6 brands I recommend. So Aura, 8 Sleep, Apple, Pixel/Fitbit, Nukua, and Whoop, if I didn't mention that yet. I think those are all 6. I hope I didn't repeat one, but those are my recommendations for top tier sleep stage tracking. All the other devices are either mid, so Garmin, Coros, Suunto, Amazfit, Samsung, they're all kind of mid-tier, and poor performers for sleep stage tracking are generally more the Chinese cheap brands like for instance Xiaomi. These really just don't have reliable sleep stage tracking. I wouldn't count on those at all. So that's the sleep stage tracking performance. We have 2 categories left, GPS tracking and the app experience. But what about GPS or location tracking? What devices would I recommend here? Now, here are a few of the things I will look out for and the brands I generally recommend. Now, for GPS tracking, I just want to highlight a few brands I really like. I'll try to show you some data for some of the older models so you can see that even the previous generation does really well. In some cases, I didn't do a recent test for this, so I cannot really show you. And I want to start off with the Apple Watch Ultra 2 that I recently retested. And what I did is I ran in this circle many times and we're looking for the most consistent signal between all of those circles. And it's actually doing really well. So the signals are super close together. It looks really good. There is a bit of smoothing going on usually with Apple, but this actually looks rather well. We can actually compare this performance to the Galaxy Watch Ultra 2, which definitely didn't do as well. There's not really a generation 2 of the Galaxy Watch Ultra, but this is the most recent Galaxy Watch that was released. And as you will see, even though it doesn't look terrible, there's definitely more deviation here in the Galaxy Watch compared to what we see for the Apple Watch down here. I'll try to get a similar perspective. So here we have the Galaxy Watch and this is the Apple Watch. The signals of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 are definitely closer than those for the Galaxy Watch Ultra. So I definitely prefer an Apple Watch over a Galaxy Watch here. There's really some weird signals with the Galaxy Watch. Another brand that generally does really well is Garmin. And as far as I know, Garmin doesn't use any or a lot of smoothing. And these are the results from my recent testing of the Garmin Forerunner 570, where even the raw signal without that smoothing looks really good. There might have been a bit of deviation here, but this could also be a real signal because sometimes some tourists are in the way. But overall, this looks really well, especially considering the low amount of processing that Garmin does. So Garmin has some of the best sensors, even in the 570, which isn't the top tier Forerunner. So I really like it. And I actually also really like the Suunto Vertical 2 that I recently tested. The signals look rather smooth, maybe a little bit, just a tiny bit worse than Garmin, but still very good. I also think Suunto doesn't do a lot of processing, so this looks rather well, except for this one signal going through the fountain for some reason. So Suunto, Garmin, and the Apple Watch Ultra 2, 3, whichever one, have really good GPS tracking. And though I don't have a lot of data for it, I did also want to show you the performance of Coros. This is the Coros Pace Pro. I really like the look of that device. And in this case, I tested it for cycling by cycling the same route 2 times, and we want those signals to overlap really well. And as you can see, generally the signals are close together. There's a little bit of deviation here, otherwise looking quite good. Also here a bit of deviation, but compared to much of the competition, this is doing really well. I didn't do that running exercise with the Coros Pace Pro, but as you can see, also Coros can make really good GPS tracking. And if you can get a good deal on the Pace Pro, it's one of my favorite running watches. So as you saw, I wouldn't rely on it for sleep stage tracking. And if you want really good heart rate tracking, maybe like for Garmin, connect an external heart rate monitor. So as I like to say, just use a chest strap. And if I didn't highlight it enough during the heart rate tracking section, if you really care about heart rate tracking, just wear that chest strap and check if the watch you're getting can actually connect to it. That way you always get reliable heart rate tracking no matter what model you get. And maybe you just love the Garmin ecosystem, but you don't love their heart rate sensor. That's a really easy way to get around it. And Garmin's are actually made similar to Coros and Suunto to connect to a lot of external devices. So as I like to say, just use a chest strap. Finally, what devices have the best app experience? So not just the hardware and firmware in the device, but the app that's on your phone that actually shows you your data, interprets your data, and gives you advice. Well, there are a few brands that stand out here, and there's also some more budget-friendly options. So the two best apps in my experience are those of the Oura Ring and the Whoop Strap. So the Oura Ring is a ring you wear in your finger, but it's a smart ring, and the Whoop Strap you can either wear on your wrist. This is actually the Amazfit Helio strap, but the Whoop Strap works similarly. I actually have a Whoop Strap right here under my pullover. So right here I wear the Whoop Strap. And the Oura Ring and the Whoop Strap generally have the best apps. So they also interpret your data, give you advice, and depending on what your focus is, I would recommend one of these. Though these are not generally for sale on Amazon. I think you can get the Oura Ring on Amazon, but the Whoop Strap you can only get directly from Whoop. And they just give you the best processing of your data and advice on what to do. If it's more health or sleep you're focused on, I'd recommend the Oura Ring. If you want a good general overall device, I recommend the Whoop Strap. I have an affiliate link for both. You can find those in the description below. But if you don't want to spend that kind of money and you don't want a subscription, so both of these come with a monthly subscription, which is not ideal for everyone, there are some budget options as well. The Amazfit Helio strap is getting better in terms of the app that they use. In some ways, they actually kind of copy the style of the Oura Ring and especially the Whoop Strap. So in terms of app experience, it's more or less the same, though the sleep stage tracking, at least in my testing so far, isn't the best yet on Amazfit devices. So there, even though the app is kind of nice, still not as good, but pretty okay, the data going into it for sleep and recovery might be slightly less good than that of the Oura Ring and the Whoop Strap. In addition, I think the Fitbit app also isn't that terrible, so you can use either a Pixel Watch or a Fitbit device with the Fitbit app, and that also gives you more interpretation than you get, for instance, with the Apple Watch. Now the Apple Watch is getting slowly a little bit better. So before there was no interpretation, then we had the Vitals app, so it interprets your 4 or 5 most important metrics and gives you sort of a summary for those. Now we also have a sleep score, but still the general app experience isn't really comprehensive and nicely packaged in my experience. Apple Health is just a hodgepodge of different data and data sources. Then there's sort of that fitness app where you can look at more of your activities. It's all getting better, but it's just not so uniform yet. I think that's where Apple can really still improve. They have the best raw data out of any device. However, the app experience still needs to be better. But if you don't want to spend a lot of money, actually an Amazfit Helio strap, especially if you focus on sport, is pretty good. And also different Fitbit devices are now quite good and they're not that expensive. If you get a Fitbit Charge 6, for instance, it will give you great sleep stage tracking, pretty good heart rate tracking, and also a pretty good app, and almost all features are free. So there is a premium tier, but you don't really need it, whereas for Oura and Whoop you just need to pay. You get nothing or almost nothing without that subscription. Now, other brands that are more sports focused like Garmin, Suunto, Coros and Polar, they have okay apps. Polar needs to improve a lot, but they're actually actively working on this. And I think Garmin, Suunto and Coros all have decent apps, though they're not quite at the level of some of these other apps I mentioned. Especially Garmin sometimes feels a bit outdated in my opinion, but they're great at integrating all different kinds of sensors into one ecosystem. Again, they also launched their premium tier now where you have to pay monthly, which I'm not a big fan of, especially for these expensive Garmin devices. But if you get a previous generation Garmin device, you might get a pretty good experience there. Heart rate tracking without an external heart rate monitor is not always amazing on Garmin devices, but in general, I always recommend getting an external chest strap if you want to track your heart rate in the most reliable way. And Garmin devices generally can connect to almost any chest strap, but check before buying a particular Garmin device if it's able to connect. And also if it has all the features you need. I reviewed most Garmin devices out there and you can find them in my channel. Now Garmin is sort of the known sports brand with a decent app. There's also Coros and Suunto, which might be less known by some people. I really like the style of Suunto and their heart rate sensor has improved a bit recently, but you would need to buy a more premium device now, so probably the Suunto Race 2 or maybe the Suunto Vertical 2 would be the devices that I would recommend at the moment. And finally, Coros also has a lot of good products. It's most comparable to Garmin out of any of the brands out there, and they're just a little bit cheaper than Garmin but still feel quite premium. So if you like Garmin but you want to spend a little bit less money, I'd recommend checking out Coros. Probably you can get a Coros Pace model like the Pace Pro for a quite decent price now, and one of these Pace models is probably on sale during the Prime days, and these are really good devices. But in summary, in most cases I don't think you need the latest generation of a device to get the best deal, especially during these Prime days. Selecting a device that is maybe one generation back might save you a third or even half of your money. Or you can get a cheaper device like the Amazfit Helio strap right here, which usually is around $99, though this is actually the special edition which isn't for sale yet, I believe. But in the end, it's all nuanced and it really depends on what your personal goals and priorities are. Now, if you do end up grabbing anything on Amazon during the Prime days, going there via my general Amazon affiliate link would be greatly appreciated. I'll again link it up here and down here. You can even bookmark it with Command or Control D or B, I think. Also, check out this video on the new sleep stage tracking of Pixel and Fitbit, and this video on the Apple Watch Ultra 3.